Good to be with you this morning. Again, I also want to express my appreciation for our visitors. We're glad you've come our way. Hope we make you feel welcome to come back whenever you have an opportunity. Something happened this week in a Bible class that I've shared with some. Kind of happened on Thursday. It hasn't happened too many times in my 40-some years of preaching. We were in a Bible class and with a person who's been eager to learn. She texted me and said, "When can we get together? I want to study." So we arranged a time. And we were studying, and we had some others join the class, but the lady, as I was talking, she had this burning question. She says, "How much is this going to cost me?" We just kind of like, "What?" Like, "No, we're not charging you for this." And you could just see that sense of relief. Oh, good. What a joy it is to find people who want to learn. Like y'all, we came here to worship God. We have that love for His Word. And there are others out there who are seeking. And I had another class yesterday, just people that just want to learn. And that is so great. But what a contrast to the vast amount that don't. So let me just start off this lesson as we learn a little bit about mankind. I've been thinking a lot about mankind. Come back and talk about that text a little bit later, but I'm going to put some names up on the screen, and I want you to be thinking as you look at all these names, and man, I could have come up with a lot more names, more biblical names, more other names in history that you're familiar with. I'm going to put these names up there, and I'm going to ask you to think to yourself, what do they all have in common? And so when you start looking at some of these names, you don't get a good feeling. There's some pretty bad people up here on the board. But you want to know what all those people have in common? That you have in common with them. I have in common with them. Oh, come on, Chuck. Don't put me in the same category there with Hitler. Yeah, I'm putting you in the same category as him. Why is that? Do you realize all those individuals back there were babies at one time? Might be hard to imagine, little Hitler running around. But no, he was a baby at one time. All these people were. And every child, and that was the text that Ike brought to our attention. I mean, yeah, Old Testament is reinforced. We'll look at that in a moment. In New Testament, it talks about that. And I love the passage over there in Matthew chapter 18. We'll just turn over there quickly, Matthew chapter 18. But folks, everybody in the Ezekiel passage, the son shall not bear the iniquity of the father. I'm not guilty because of something my dad did. My dad is not guilty of something because I did. It works both ways, he said. Nor the father bear the iniquity of the son. It doesn't work that way. Now, I know a lot of us are looking at this, what we're going to be dealing with today, and say, how do people end up like this? How does that happen? Well, before we get there, we need to talk about this. Everybody. Equal playing ground. Matthew 18, verse 1. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus called a little child to him and set him in the midst of them and said, "Assuredly, I say to you, unless you are converted to become like little children, you are by no means entered the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as a little child is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one of these, one little child like this in my name receives me." He's talking about this idea of children and their disposition. And there's children in the audience tonight. And all of us were children at one time when we were little. And we were innocent. There was no hate in our bodies. We didn't look down on anybody. No envy or strife in our hearts. So putting God aside for just a moment. Think about this. Everybody in this world, I mean, even people that don't have parents that are, their parents are not Christians. But when a child is brought into this world, what do they do for that child? Now, we're going to get to some very important stuff here because those list of names that I put up there and how they were born innocent, they were children at one time, these infants, had parents. Now, sometimes parents don't bring their children up the way they're supposed to. I'll talk about that in just a few moments. But by and large, what do parents do? What did your parents do for you? Well, Chuck, my parents couldn't care less about God. But for the most part, my parents loved me. Some parents don't do it properly. But I'm just saying, by and large, all those names that I put up there, hopefully that they had parents that loved them. They provided for them. They gave them food. They gave them clothing. They gave them shelter. They gave them the necessities of life. They taught them. They guided them. That's what parents do. They want to do that for them. They protect them with warnings, with rules, because of point number one, that they actually love them. And that's why your parents did the same thing, because they love you. They encouraged you. They praised you. You did a good job. Just that wonderful uplifting and strengthening that children know that they could count on their mom and dad. And even part of that, your parents would discipline you. They would punish you for things that you were doing that were wrong. Why? Because they love you. A lot of people don't understand that. And some today, and I'll talk about this, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but who wouldn't do this as a parent? Who wouldn't do this? Now, those names that I put up there earlier, they had parents. Now, they might not have had the best upbringing in the world, and a lot of people today don't have the best upbringing in the world, but what I'm saying is, by and large, with every child that's brought into this world, there is no sin in their life. It's like Adam and Eve were created before they sinned, innocent. Every one of us were innocent. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this. See, because parents are warned. Now, those list of names up there, sometimes you could say, well, it's because of their upbringing. Maybe they taught their children to hate, to have prejudice. I was raised in a very prejudicial home. I mean, I can remember just, and you learn things from your mom and your dad. So sometimes that happens. So parents are warned about to fulfill their duties. Over there in Ephesians chapter 6. Now, the reason I like this passage is because I want to talk about how they could be guilty of doing something that Paul says don't do. What does Paul say don't do? Well, he says in verse 4, you fathers do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Well, what would be ways that would provoke your children? Well, number one, in the class we taught this week, we talked about Jacob. We talked about how that he gave Joseph a coat of many colors. He showed favoritism to one over the other. And we as parents, we try not to do this because we know that's not right. I know when even my kids get together, they still think we have a favorite. They're crazy, But, that they get that feeling. And you don't want to do it on purpose. And that's a danger. When you constantly hear, why can't you be more like your sister? Why can't you be more like your brother? As you're constantly hearing that stuff, that can be tough. That can be tough. And parents need to be aware of that. And of course, don't encourage your children to sin. Herodias. I put her up there on that first list, just, because it kind of jumped at my mind. You're thinking about people, go ahead, daughter, dance in front of these men, and when they want to ask you for something, ask for John the Baptist's head. Okay, Mom, I'll do what you want me to do. What parent would encourage their children to sin? I'd have been responsible for some of the names that we had on that list. But I'm saying that we're all, right? We know where we're going with this. We've all sinned and come short of the glory of God. And I'll get to that a little bit later. But let's talk a little bit about parents right now. We don't want to encourage our children to sin, to do the wrong thing. We want them to do what is right. Don't let them do whatever they want. You go over there and read in 1 Samuel chapter 3 and verse 13. Eli was rebuked because he didn't control his children. He let them do whatever they wanted. Children don't make the rules. I don't know if that list that we had there, their parents, what happened. Doesn't always happen that way, as I'll talk about in just a few moments. But what happened? Did you just let them make their own rules as they grew up, and you never said no to them? Have you ever been around children who've never been told no? Oh, I have. And I've been around children who've been told no. And respectful. Thank you. Give me. I want this. The contrast between the two. And so just letting your children do whatever they want, making their own decisions, as the little ones, as they grow up, but there's going to come a time. I'm going to talk about them in a moment. There's going to come a time, you know what? They're not children anymore. They're all grown up. Just like us. But in the meantime, we're talking about parenting here and their responsibility, because we bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. We want them to do the right thing. But even for people, remember what we're talking about here? Even for people that are, I wanted to go backwards. Even for people that are not Christians. My parents, it's not like they wanted me to go to heaven. They didn't want me to go to heaven. But they pretty much were doing this. Not the biblical teaching per se, but, they had a love for me, and they sheltered me, and they provided food, and they taught me different things, and so I would be safe, warned me. And boy, there were rules. And number 6, wow, that was pretty bad, okay? But the point is, they did those things. Now, we as God's people, we want to make sure that we are bringing our children up properly, and we don't want to play the hypocrite. Now, I don't want to make assumptions with the scriptures here. I do know Peter was rebuked for playing the hypocrite here by Paul. I also know that Peter was married. He was an elder within the congregation, 1 Peter chapter 5, which meant he had to have children and believing children, older children. Now, did the children know about this? I'm not saying that they would know about this, but I'm just saying if they did, the idea here is, the point I'm just trying to make, might be a little bit of a leap, but I just want you to see that parents, one of the worst things you can do is be inconsistent. You're play acting. You act one way here, and the children get in the car and go, didn't Dad just lead a prayer? Why is he talking like that? And or didn't the preacher just talk about this, and Mom and Dad are doing it? It just, nothing will discourage a child or provoke a child more when they see that kind of inconsistency that is there. You see, we're bringing this on a small scale, but I'm trying to get this on a larger scale. What do I mean? Why? Why were there people like Hitler, Saddam Hussein, Charles Manson, why are there people? And I can tell you something, if you Google, and I did it really quick, I went, evil people in the world. Boom! 850. Real evil people, okay? Some of these Chinese dynasties and talk about all the evils they did, right? But my point is, how does that happen? How does a person like Hitler even exist? How did it get there? Because he was a child, wasn't he? And there was no sin, right? There was no sin. And so globally, why is there so much evil in the world today? Well, whatever evil you're thinking about, who's ever guilty of doing it, they were a child. They were a child. So, boy, I really don't like the crime in St. Louis. Boy, I don't like the crime. Who's committing the crime? People who were children. They were infants. They were born innocent in this world. So how do we explain all this? Well, we're looking at it. We're realizing what's happened is that children grow up. Now I want to ask you something. Food for thought. Back in Genesis chapter 3, Adam and Eve have children. Cain, Abel at first, that's what we're talking about here. And how come Cain killed his brother? Now, you could use Cain as an example to represent a lot of a category of a certain kind of people in this world, a certain kind of people that are so full of hate that think nothing of killing somebody. Think nothing of killing somebody. So Cain, did Adam and Eve treat him differently? Do you think he raised them differently? I don't think there's anything in the scriptures that implies that they were raised differently. So this begs the question, why did this happen? Why didn't Cain act like Abel? Well, the answer is obvious. Cain, if you read the first 4 or 5 verses there in Genesis chapter 3, that should be chapter 4, because I wanted to point this out. What we're noticing here is Cain made his own choices. That list of evil people I put up on the board, they made their own choices in this world. Now you can talk all day long, but why did they do this? Why did Cain do what he did, folks? It all comes down. Why did Eve take the fruit? Why did Adam take it? Every transgression, why did that child, as he grew older, why are they being disrespectful? Why are there bullies in high school? Why do they pick on other kids? Why is there so much bad? Why do people lie? Why do people cheat? In the business realm, why do people do that? Why do they take advantage of people that really don't know a whole lot about certain things? I shared with you one time of a car dealership because a guy told me who sold cars. He went to the dealership and they were all laughing because they took advantage of this young woman. And took her for thousands and thousands of dollars and they're rejoicing over it. Why do people act like that, folks? Well, see, what I'm trying to get us to see is people have made their own choices. And most people in this world, well, first of all people choose to do wrong. Romans 3:23, we've all sinned and come short of the glory of God. Maybe not like a Charles Manson. May not have been wrong like him, but we've all sinned. But how does people end up like that we've talked about? It's because it's their own choices. So Cain, what happens with Cain? It says in verse 3, in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought his offering, and which the Lord respected. Verse 5, he did not respect Cain and his offering, and Cain was very angry and his countenance fell. Right there. So, person is raised, they learn right and wrong, Cain offers a sacrifice, God is not pleased with it, and Cain gets angry. So now let's ask the question, why do people get angry? Have you ever been angry? Have you ever been angry? Oh, I have been angry. I've raised 3 children. Of course we get angry. Well, he got angry. The Bible teaches over there in Ephesians, was it chapter 4? Be angry and sin not, Paul said. So nothing wrong with being angry. But Cain was angry for the wrong reason. He was guilty. He realized what he did was wrong, and he didn't like to be told he was wrong. Do you guys enjoy being told when you're wrong? Anybody here? Put up your hand. Yeah, I love being told when I'm wrong, Chuck. Especially as a husband. Well, I'm quick to do that. No. Yeah, we don't like to admit when we're wrong. Well, he didn't like to admit he was wrong. And then it went to the next level. And so he ends up killing his brother Abel. But was it Adam and Eve's fault? And what about Jesus? When Jesus he taught in parables a lot. And he taught the story about the prodigal son. Do you think the father in his story, as Jesus was teaching, was conveying that the father treated the elder son and the younger son differently? Do you get that idea that he treated them differently? I don't see it. As a matter of fact, when the younger son said, divide us our inheritance, he gave it to both. It said he divided amongst them both. So both sons got the inheritance. So you don't see in there, but wait a minute, that younger son says, I'm leaving home. Okay. Choice is yours. But why do people go off and gamble all that money and throw their money away? On ungodly living? Because that's what the son wanted to do. It was his choice. People decide to do things like that. Was Jesus teaching every parent raised their children badly? Well, this is an interesting passage. Turn over to Matthew chapter 10. This is interesting. Matthew chapter 10. Jesus is saying this. Jesus is talking. And he mentions here in verse 21. Well, let's back up. Look at 19. But when they deliver you up, do not worry about how you should speak, for it would be given to you at what hour you should speak. Giving his followers some comfort there. It says, For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. Now, brother will deliver up brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. What? Yeah. Sometimes, family will turn on family. Why would they do that? Because some are standing for the truth and some are not standing for the truth, and be aware of that. They're going to save their own skin. Oh, no, the Christian dad is. He is. Turn them in to save their own skin, whatever. Well, what? Was Jesus teaching every parent to raise their children badly? No, he wasn't teaching that. What Jesus was saying is that there's going to come a time when children are going to grow up. And because of all the influences that are out there, and there's a lot of influences, mom and dad try to do the best that they can. There's a song by Merle Haggard that said, Mama tried. He rebelled and he ends up in prison. But he says, Mama tried to teach me. Mama tried. And so mom and dads, you can try hard, but there's no hard, fast rule that says if you do it. Now, the proverb writer says you train up a child in the way he will go and he will not depart. But that's just a proverb. And that's not guaranteed, because there are times when you do what you're supposed to do and a child will still rebel. But I'm getting to the point here I'm trying to get you to see is this answers the question of why there is so much evil in this world today. Because what you have here, why so much evil? You can't make people have an evil heart, but in Genesis chapter 6, he talked about the idea that how much evil was in the world. Every thought, intent of their heart was evil continually. Really? Yeah. Now, that didn't mean that everybody was wanting to kill everybody. I mean, you could have evil thoughts in your mind all the time, thinking about somebody else's wife, you're thinking about jealousy or having envy in your heart. These are a lot of thoughts that, that's just evil. That's just wrong to think bad things about other people. But he describes the people there that were thinking badly. But you know what? You can't make people have an evil heart. That is their choice. When Noah, when that flood came and God wanted to destroy the world, I'm going to tell you something. What he was saying is these people there, that were evil, they were all children at one time. But they grew up. That's all. They grew up. Just like you and I did. And we are the minority here in St. Louis. Not everybody in St. Louis wants to go to heaven. Not everybody wants to serve the Lord faithfully. But you have a desire to do that, and that's wonderful. Everyone makes their own choices in life. Everyone makes them. And the passage that we started out with Ike, God said, is it my fault? They're the ones who chose to do evil. You can choose to do right or you can choose to do wrong. And I shared with you recent classes where people are wanting to do the right thing. They just want to go to heaven. And that's wonderful. How could Noah be righteous with so much wickedness in the world? Now let's look at the positive. There was this whole world. And it says everybody's thought. It even repented God that he even made man. Look how evil they are. And then he looks down and there's a good man. Found grace in the eyes of the Lord. How is that even possible? How is it possible? Noah made his own choices. I want you to think about that idea for a moment. You can rise above the evils in this world. Over there in 1 Kings chapter 15, if you're taking notes, it's worthy of reading because King Asa, king of Judah, his grandfather was an idolater, king, an idolatrous king. His dad was an idolatrous king. What are the odds that Asa is going to follow their footsteps? He becomes king, gets rid of all the idols. How do you do that? There are people here in this audience, including myself, and I'll sit there and go, how come I'm where I am now and none of my family even cares? I offered to teach my mom. I did offer to teach my dad when he was alive. No, I'm good. I'm good. Why? I was raised the exact same ways my other 4 siblings were raised. Do you know that? Exactly. I don't sit there and say one's the favorite. Well, I do say one's the favorite. I always say that the oldest was the favorite. But anyways, but the point is they raised us the same way. Well, because the point is you get to the point where you have to make your own choices in life. I made my own choice. You made your own choices. You're here today. Your parents may or may not even care about the Lord. But why are you here? Because you've decided to do the right thing. You want to learn about the Lord. You want to follow the Lord. What about Paul? Man, I'm going to tell you something about Paul. You talk about rising above the situation that he was in. Listen to this. Philippians chapter 3, you talk about his past. He says, if anybody could have had confidence in the flesh, I more so. He actually worded it this way. If anyone else thinks he may have confidence in the flesh, I more so. I was circumcised the 8th day of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, concerning the law of Pharisee, concerning zeal persecuting the church, concerning righteousness which was in the law, blameless. Oh man, if anybody could, I was in one of the most popular religions. I was the most active in it. I kept the religious laws perfectly. Man, and I persecuted the church. I was very zealous in that religion. I was very zealous. And what did he say? He said in verse 7, but what things were gained to me, these I counted as loss for Christ. We are willing to realize that even when we were brought up in this world innocently, we grew older and we transgressed and we realized we wanted forgiveness of sin. Those people that list I put up there as those evildoers, guess what? Jesus died for them too. And his blood could cover their transgressions if they would have turned to him. Simple as that. And the Lord can help us if we'll turn to him. But the choice the choice is ours. Some of the Corinthian brethren, he talks about in verses 9 through 11, he talks about all those sins that were there. Adultery, homosexuality, drunkenness, murder. And he says, and such were some of you. Some of you were that evil, but you are covered by the blood of Christ. That's why Jesus came. He came to save those who want to be. He came to save for the whole world, of course. But not everybody's going to come to him. He knows that. Few will do it in our day. Few did it in his day. Narrow is the road that leads to life, and few there be that find it. All those people on the broad road were all children at one time and were innocent. They grew up, they transgressed, and decided to stay in sin. Those on the narrow road also grew up and eventually learned and understood, I need forgiveness of sin. I want to go to heaven, and they obeyed the gospel. You have the choice of staying on the broad road or the narrow road. Why is there a broad road? Why is there so many there? Because they have chosen. Nobody is on the broad road that hasn't chosen to be. Do you understand that? And nobody gets on the narrow road unless you choose to get on the narrow road. Man is accountable. Man is accountable. All of us. The choice is ours. Jesus says, come unto me, all ye that are heavy laden, I'll give you rest. You can accept it or reject it. That's as simple as that. We're all born innocent, but we all made the choice to sin, just like Adam and Eve. And so on a large scale, I can look into this world and think about all the evils that have gone on and all the evils that continue to go on. It doesn't surprise me. It saddens me because these evil people were innocent little children at one time. And they grew up and they chose to stay in sin. What about you? Did you come out of it? Hope so. Majority of you have become Christians. But remember, we have to stay faithful. That was the passage that I read. If you become a child of God and you are righteous and then you go back into the world, those righteous things will not cover up. So I won't remember them anymore. We got to remember, be faithful till death, Revelation 2, verse 10. What a joy it is to have that peace that passes all understanding. And I'm not going to let the lost and all the evils out there cause me to lose sight of my accountability. And I want you to think about your accountability today. Be thankful for salvation that's found through Christ. If you're not a Christian, you can become one today. Put on Christ. Put off the old man of sin. He said, you're a slave to sin, as Paul put it. But you can obey from the heart that form of doctrine that's been delivered. You can become a child of God. Put on Christ in baptism, meeting the prerequisites. And if you're a child of God that's gone wayward, you need to come back. We'll pray with you, pray for you. But let's all learn from this today.